You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-host, Kevin. Kevin, how are we doing tonight?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Another wonderful Tuesday night. Get to break down the rest of the quarterbacks here this evening. We got some news to talk about. Like, we actually have movement. We knew we were waiting for that post June 1st cutoff for some things to happen, and hey, did not disappoint this year. Definitely got some things there. So overall, it's really good. Stanley Cup playoffs started tonight. Stanley Cup finals started tonight. The NBA finals start tomorrow night. It's just, we're rocking and rolling, man. Great time of year here. Summer's starting, all the things. Everything's turning up roses right now.
Absolutely. So, certainly some good stuff happening, right? Like, you mentioned about some of the NHL and the NBA getting going with their championship series here. But you're also spot on there when you say that we had some news happen over the last week, right? Like last week, the week before, we were kind of lamenting that it'd been a slow cycle and not much news had kind of been going out, and they hit the ground running with those with that June 1st date and all these post June 1st moves that started happening. So let's go ahead and just kind of hop right into it, right? And we'll kind of start with the bigger, probably the biggest news, and the one that maybe kind of caught some folks by surprise, where all of a sudden, right, the Browns had said for a long time that they're not moving off of Myles Garrett. They're not going to trade him. They're not going to move him. Sign him to a pretty big deal there. And then things started kind of percolating yesterday that there's some teams interested in calling the Browns, and then all of a sudden it's news broke and Myles Garrett is headed to Los Angeles. Thoughts on this one?
I think that the Rams have done a very, very good job making this work. And typical Rams fashion, they have been historically over the last 10 years or so been willing to part with draft picks for win now players. And we saw it with the Matt Stafford trade. We saw it with they had a streak of 8 seasons without a first round draft pick. It was something crazy. The Von Miller deal, like we saw that. And now we're seeing it with Myles Garrett. So they give up Jared Verse, who is a young, very talented defensive player in his own right, along with I believe it's a 27 first round pick, a 28 second round pick, and a third. I don't remember the year on the third. 28 or 29 third.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I think it works out well. The Browns are rebuilding, right? And it didn't matter. We saw what Myles Garrett did last year, and it didn't help him a lick. Like, it's just one of those things. So Myles Garrett's going to be rejuvenated, right? Ready to fight for the playoffs and a chance to show what he can do postseason and try and get himself a Super Bowl ring. It's kind of the one major accolade that he has not accomplished yet. So he gets a chance at that. The Browns get a young, really good defensive player in Jared Verse, and then some more draft capital to help build him around. So we'll see how Cleveland can kind of muck that up in the future years. But for now, most people are saying that the Rams absolutely crushed that, only having to give up a player and then the first, second, and third. So kudos to them. It makes the Rams extremely dangerous. You can tell that they are in a very tight win now window, but they have plenty of talent across that defensive line now, and the offense plugged along last year very well. We expect them to do more of the same this year. So the Rams are top contention spot in the NFC at least.
Right. Well, so I went and looked it up, right? It was 7 consecutive years that the Rams went without a first round pick, right? It was 2017 to 2023. Funnily enough, they broke that streak in 2024 by drafting Jared Verse with their first round pick and then traded him away as part of this deal. 2025, they traded that pick away. 2026, they used that to draft a backup quarterback, potentially even third string at this point coming in. And then 2027, they've traded that away for to get Myles Garrett in this trade as well. So they will effectively, unless they trade back into the first round here in 2027, they will have really gone about 10 years with one pick still on the roster for first round picks.
And I'd say for the most part, it hasn't done them a disservice.
No, they seem to
they're really not in cap hell. They've been able to navigate the cap pretty well. And when you're finishing in playoff contention or in the playoffs, right? These back end of the first round picks are even more of a crapshoot than picking in the top 10.
Right.
So if you can give up what you perceive as a really late first round pick, right? They are anticipating that pick is pick 30, 31, 32, right? That's what the Rams envision. And you're able to take that into a deep playoff run, potentially a Super Bowl winning, run. I understand their logic. It's well worth it.
Right. And
when you stumble,
made it work, right?
Yeah, it's when you stumble. And if for whatever reason, and again, we don't hope for injury, but if they come across some injuries, if things, really just go against them, it's the top 10 picks or the picks that turn into top 10 picks that really kind of screw things up.
Right. So yeah, we'll see how they rock and roll that one. That was one that I would have really actually liked to have seen what the Rams would have been able to do had they been able to retain Jared Verse and bring in Garrett on that one, to have those two kind of opposite of each other. Like that would have been interesting to see, but right, they made the deal and certainly brought a game wrecker in at that point. So any other thoughts
and
on
now
good?
Well, just to piggyback off it, now you have Aaron Donald texting Pat McAfee maybe I need to come out of retirement and play. And again, it's newsworthy only because when Aaron Donald still looked like he had it. When he decided to step away from the game, Aaron Donald was still a force to be reckoned with. And he is now 2 full seasons removed from the last time he played in an NFL game. But if you follow him or have seen pictures of him, he doesn't look that much different, guys. Like he did not go into retirement mode and then completely change his lifestyle. He is still a gym rat. He is a workout warrior. In football shape? No, probably not, but I don't think he would claim that. But his body is at least in enough of a athletic and strong athletic shape. Like not just, oh yeah, I used to be able to do this. Like if anybody could make a comeback after 2 years off and get right back to it, I think Aaron Donald could do it. We saw it with Gronk, right? Gronk took a couple years off and then came back to play with Tom. As effective, arguably at times, right? Didn't play the full amount of snaps that he played in New England that he did in Tampa Bay, but he was a big part of that Super Bowl. Like he did his part. So if Aaron Donald decides to come back, holy smokes, like the Rams to the moon. If you get Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald on that defensive line, nightmares for offensive coordinators.
Yes, absolutely. So, the probably one of the worst kept secrets also trades happened also post June 1st, right? The Patriots and the Eagles closed that deal where AJ Brown heading to New England, and Philadelphia seemingly, like, it actually kind of surprised me the compensation that they were able to get back on that with the first, and I believe they got a third back as well, right? So, one of those that even after a down year, they were still able to get more than what I think they gave up to acquire AJ Brown. So kind of an interesting
Yeah.
move.
I know people in some circles were kind of laughing at it a little bit, saying the Broncos paid more for Jalen Waddle than the Patriots did for AJ Brown. But I think it's a couple things. One, we knew AJ Brown was not long for Philadelphia. So the initial offers were going to be less, right? The Broncos knocking on the Dolphins door saying, "Hey, is Waddle available?" is much different than the Eagles knocking on the Patriots door and say, "Hey, what do you think about AJ Brown?" Like, it's just different compensation packages on top of how the contracts work out. Jalen Waddle's contract is pretty stinking team friendly, right? For the next year, maybe two, and then they have to make a real decision. But for the next couple of years, it's still a pretty friendly compensation. AJ Brown, not as much. It's a bit of a steeper price tag, but the Patriots had a ton of cap room and they could handle that. So, I like you said, Derek, it wasn't a well-kept secret. We knew this was happening. We were just curious to see what the compensation looked like. But to move on from a player who wasn't happy, maybe you weren't happy with him, they weren't, he wasn't happy with you, whatever that is, and to still receive a first and third pick is not a bad thing. And if anybody can take that first and third pick and turn it into something, track record says the Philadelphia Eagles are on the short list of teams that can make that work, regardless of that pick being, anywhere from 27 to 32.
Right. And I did say it was a third round pick. My apologies. It was that trade is for a 2028 first round and a 2027 fifth round. Is the compensation Philadelphia received back. The first and the third was when Tennessee traded AJ Brown to Philadelphia. So, right, like you got AJ Brown arguably kind of in the prime of his career, and got about what you gave up back for him when you traded him again. So kind of an interesting dynamic there. Plus AJ Brown headed to New England, reunites with Mike Vrabel, who was the coach in Tennessee when Tennessee drafted him. So kind of a little bit of a full circle moment there. So it'll be interesting to see how they ultimately kind of use him and bring that out to play there. But certainly a downfield weapon for Drake May, and potentially a move that could see that offense get even a little bit trickier there.
Yeah, it definitely gives them a true alpha, right? That's something that New England didn't have last year. They were able to kind of spread that out, even with Diggs, right? Diggs was not a true alpha, although he led the team in a lot of receiving categories. AJ Brown gives you that ability. He still has breakaway speed. He can get down the field. He's a big-bodied receiver. He just checks multiple boxes for you and truly gives Drake May a go-to weapon outside the numbers, as well as Brown. He's able to go not play. He doesn't play inside as much, but he's able to do in-breaking routes because of that big body, right? He's able to shield the ball. Safeties can't get over the top of him very easily, and if they cheat and miss, he's got the speed to go. So it makes New England much more difficult to tackle from a defensive standpoint. And I think it helps Drake May take this next step in his young career, where a lot of people already had him as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. Potentially moves him up the board into the top 3. So I think all these things are interesting. I think both teams did what they could, and the Eagles are retooling at the moment, right? With some contracts and players moving on and this, that, and the other. But I would tell you, we'll talk about it more when we get to wide receivers, but I love Devonta Smith this year. Like,
right.
I think a lot of people, until we get right on top of draft day, are still sleeping on him. But now that we know this AJ Brown deal is done and he's moving on, it'll be interesting to see over the next week where some of these best ball drafts go for Devonta Smith and how far he starts to climb up the board.
Right. Yeah, I think we'll definitely see him take some big steps there when it comes to fantasy draft capital. Some other news that came out today as well, right? Drake London and the Falcons agreed to an extension that makes him the third highest paid receiver in the league with that extension. So, yeah, it is one of those that I still want to see how this quarterback room is going to shake out and what the reports come on this one is. But yeah, this is one of those that I still don't know that even with the big deal and the Falcons kind of putting their money where their mouth is on their thoughts around Drake London. I don't know that it moves the dial much for me on a fantasy perspective at this point.
No, not from a fantasy perspective. The quarterback dilemma is still outweighing what Drake London getting paid does. Now, when healthy, London has served well, right? It's a volume perspective and the quality of targets that he's been getting. But we've seen Drake London play at an elite level. Top three, maybe not from performance standpoint, but the way the salary cap goes, everybody's going to, they're pushing the envelope, right? Everybody in their top spot, even for a team, let alone the league, is really pushing that envelope. So, good on him. I hope that the Falcons get their money's worth and that he turns out to be everything that they're paying him to be, but they got to figure out who's taking snaps and they got to figure out how to keep him healthy.
Right. Yeah. So one of those that I really liked where he was going in previous years thing kind of shakes out and what that camp news looks like. But any other news notes that you want to hit up here before we start diving into some quarterbacks?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that came out. I don't think so. I think we're good. We can get into quarterbacks.
All righty. Let's go ahead and hop on into it. So last week we hit up the quarterbacks 18 through 34. This week we're going to continue on down the list. We're going to go 17 to 1 on this week and really looking at the guys on where they're coming off the board currently in the average draft position. So let's go ahead and start here with number 17, and that is Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray last year, 161 attempts, 110 completions, 962 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 173 yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground. Thoughts on Kyler Murray?
So, Kyler Murray's interesting in that the way people talk about Kyler Murray is more inflated than the way people draft Kyler Murray. So, for all intents and purposes, right, Kyler Murray's number 17. If you look at best ball charts and where he's going, he's coming off the board closer to quarterback 26. So, again, actions speak louder than words, but the words are what we're going off of here today. So, I think the potential, if Kyler Murray is able to get a grasp of that playbook and run that offense and hold off 5, right? Is it 5? 9. Whatever his nickname is. No, why can't I think of that? Doesn't matter. Sorry, brain fart. But he has, again, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, you have TJ Hawkinson, you have Aaron Jones coming back. Yes, he's a little bit longer in the tooth, but he's another weapon. He's a good receiving back. We've seen this, right? So Kyler needs to be able to move better than what he did in Arizona is kind of the biggest thing. Like, this could take Kyler Murray, and he has a really low floor and he has a pretty high ceiling. Like, he is definite wild card as far as quarterbacks go this year, because he could finish outside of the top 24, right? If he doesn't play and gets usurped, or if he doesn't even start the season as the starter for the Vikings, it's going to be hard for him to climb up. But if he's the starter right away, where a lot of people think he is, that remains to be seen. But if he does end up starting right away, you would think that he has enough weaponry around him that Kyler Murray should be able to flirt with the top 12. I don't know how much over 10 he can really get to, but he can flirt with the top 12. So great. I like him as a really good wild card number 2 quarterback. Definitely don't want to wait and settle on him as my starting quarterback. But I do think that there's some really good potential there in Minnesota with the offense that they run, the weapons that they have, and allow Kyler Murray to kind of reset from some frustrating seasons in Arizona. And sometimes a change of scenery is just what guys need.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Right. This is one that, like, in a best ball format, absolutely love Kyler Murray for a best ball format, especially, looking in that second to third QB range on that one. I really like him in a super flex as my second QB there. Right, this is one that the two that we keep seeing a lot of mention about him and McCarthy being in a camp battle and a QB competition and all of that. A lot of the reports coming out from folks that have watched some of these practices and watched some of this that say, yeah, this is a QB competition and a QB battle in name only. Like this, the on-field production and what they're seeing between these two, actually out there in practice, it's not even close between Murray and McCarthy. So, yeah, this is one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. And if Kyler Murray's still down here at QB 17, I'm going to be smashing the draft button on that one come draft season. Even in a single QB league, I'm going to be smashing the yes on that one and picking up like my backup potential bye week fill in. And this is a guy that potentially can well outperform that QB 17 position, potentially get up into a back end QB1 type of range. And yeah, this could be a move that you flip him down the stretch to fill out some other parts of your roster. So this is a guy that, a little bit of risk, fair bit of risk and a whole lot of reward type of potential here. And I'm willing to take that ride. So Kyler Murray is a draft for me where he's coming off the board. And I think there's some good value there. Any other thoughts on Kyler Murray?
No, sir.
All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and head on over to Jared Goff, who's currently coming off the board at QB 16. Last year, 578 attempts, 393 yards, 4,564 yards, 34 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 45 yards on the ground. Thoughts on Jared Goff?
I think this is about where Jared Goff lands. Like, you have weeks of brilliance, but the Lions ran the ball a bit more last year and relied on Jahmyr Gibbs. The offensive line has kind of been decimated between injuries and people leaving town. Like, Jared Goff kind of flirting in that top 10, top 12, like we've seen for the last, like, what was it, 22 and 23 time frame. I think that's kind of behind us. He's a serviceable quarterback, but I think elite quarterback he is not. So I like this 16 landing spot. I think there's a bit of a buffer on either side, but relatively low floor for Jared Goff. But I think the ceiling's also kind of relatively limited. I just don't see the Lions, revamping the entire offense and having him just chuck it around the yard to St. Brown and JMO like a lot of fantasy owners want him to.
Right. I really like this draft capital for Jared Goff. This is, again, one of those that if I'm down there and playing a little bit of a late QB type of move, I'm looking at a super flex, best ball type of deal. I really like where he's coming off the board. And I think that you'll get a lot of value on this because I do think he is a little bit of a higher floor, right? There is some of the things with the home road splits that tend to drive you nuts with being a Jared Goff manager, but still, this is 4 consecutive seasons of over 4,400 yards through the air, 4 consecutive seasons of 29 or more touchdowns, and this is a deal that I think that you can easily see him finish back end QB1, right? So you're taking him at QB 16. I think that realistically his range is anywhere from about QB 8 to QB 12 on this one. So I think that there is some tremendous value on this one and a guy that I'm willing to take that shot on late. So again, I think there's a lot of good value here on this one. There's some other guys kind of going up ahead of this that I think I'd actually rather take a Jared Goff over some of these other guys and let it ride that way, right? This is one that I feel like I can get some really good value. Any other thoughts on Jared Goff?
Negative.
All right, awesome. Let's go ahead and head on over to the guy coming off the board at QB15, and that is Bo Nix. Last year, Bo Nix, 612 attempts, 388 completions, 3,931 yards, 25 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 356 yards on the ground, and 5 touchdowns. Thoughts on Bo Nix?
I would like to see his completion percentage creep up just a little bit. That being said, I think this is really good value for Bo Nix. Like I understand that he's going to have some weeks where it's just not going to be ideal, but if you're waiting on quarterback, we saw it last year and saw glimpses of it his rookie year. Like he can get you into the top 10, right? Last year at 7. I think we can continue to see something similar. I'd like to see, like I said, him continue to use his legs uh, and get some of those cheat points. The 5 touchdowns was great. I'm not sure that I expect that again, but I would love to see, 3 or 4. But if we can kind of balance that out, and maybe he throws for another couple hundred yards because his completion percentage ticks up, 1 or 2 less rushing touchdowns, but throws 4 or 5 more passing touchdowns. Again, a bit of a stretch, tough schedule for the Broncos, but I think I'd be happy with that. With 28 passing touchdowns, 4 rushing. If you can get to 30 or more is the total I'm looking for.
Right. No, and this is another one that I think there's some good value here, right? Bo Nix, first 2 seasons finished at QB7, both of those seasons. I think that you'll get a little bit of rinse and repeat here, right? This is one that a little bit more of a caution on this one, just because of he's coming off of that ankle injury that he missed the AFC Championship game on here this last year. He's anticipated to be an observer here at OTA, so we're not seeing him really kind of back on the field yet at this point. So it'll be interesting to see, kind of how this offseason shapes up and how this starts looking and working as we get into training camp and going towards week 1. But if he's a guy that's projected to start all 17 games here for the Broncos, I think that this is an incredible value. And this is a guy that again has got a lot of back end QB1 potential, right? Like, I think we see him probably again with about 3,700 yards through the air, probably in the 26 to 28 touchdown range. And I think we still see him get some work done with his legs with about 300 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. So this is another one of those that I think we can get good value here coming off the board at QB15, and a guy that we can see tick up and potentially get inside the top 10 type of finish for fantasy purposes. So, I do think that there is some value here, and not quite. I can understand why some people are kind of shying away with the ankle injury and all of that, but this is a guy that I'm still seeing as some tremendous value coming off the board. Any other thoughts on Bo Nix?
No, sounds like we both like the kid.
Yep. All right, let's go ahead and head on over to Brock Purdy, who's coming off the board at QB 14. Last year, 284 yards or 284 attempts, 197 completions, 2,167 yards, 20 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 147 yards on the ground, and 3 touchdowns. Thoughts on Brock Purdy?
What? It's kind of an interesting bag with Brock. So I liked Brock coming into the 2025 season. Then he missed some time, but then kind of started to work his way back down the stretch a little bit. Specifically weeks 15, 16, and 17, right? Fantasy Gold finished QB4, QB1, QB1. Like, I'm not saying that's going to be the same, but I do think that
run.
That's your playoff run, right? Like, you can't forget that.
Right.
I think that adding Mike Evans, as long as Mike Evans stays healthy, I would tell you that there's tremendous value with Brock Purdy, right? Same thing with McCaffrey. Like, if you can keep your aging wide receiver, your brand new aging wide receiver, and your all-purpose MVP caliber running back healthy, I think that this is a really good floor potentially for Brock Purdy. I think that there's a lot to be said that we should not expect Christian McCaffrey to see 400 plus touches again this season like we did last season. So if that's the case, again, it puts more on Purdy's shoulders as you're taking some of that load off of McCaffrey. And if he plays, if he plays a full set of games and plays all 17, you continue to see that lifted up. So I like Purdy here. I believe in a Kyle Shanahan regular season offense. They find ways to put points up on the board, are pretty consistent with that. They just have to avoid some of the injuries that at times can creep up and really haunt the 49ers. And with Mike Evans, relatively chronic hamstring issues, Christian McCaffrey, another year older, coming off 420 some odd total touches. Brandon Ayuk, even though he's on the roster, isn't going to be playing for the Niners. Whether he sits, who knows, or whether they find a trade partner. So lots of different moving pieces here. But overall, I do like Purdy. He's relatively I think he's relatively secure with the football. Last year we saw him take a couple more chances. A couple of those interceptions weren't necessarily his fault, but I think every quarterback has, at least 2 a season that weren't his fault. They just go on his stat sheet. So, if I'm going to say it for him, it probably holds true to the other 31 starting quarterbacks as well. But overall, Purdy's a guy that I really like in a super flex league as my number 2. I like his upside. In a single quarterback league, I'm probably going somewhere else. Maybe someone who has a bit more movement with their legs. But in a super flex format, Brock Purdy to me is a ideal number 2 quarterback.
Yeah, and this is one that Brock Purdy, again, some value here, right? This is a guy that if he can stay healthy, you're going to see him put up in be QB1 when it's all said and done at the end of the season, right? But this is a deal that's right. He's missed some time here and there, and inevitably it tracks him down and puts him in that QB2 range when that happens. So I do like the upside here. There is a little bit of risk reward type of factor with this, but you're right. This is also a team that has a lot of improvements all around the offensive line here. Or all around the offense as a whole here, right? Bringing in Mike Evans, bringing in Christian Kirk, Ricky Parasol's there, right? Like the Mike Evans, Christian Kirk would be perceived as upgrades over Juwan Jennings, Kendrick Bourne, George Kittle. Though we'll see what that looks like with him coming back with that Achilles injury, right? And that's kind of a big piece of that offense that may not be there or may not be up to what we've seen and come to expect from him in the past. But this is a guy that I do think has some good upside, but also comes with a bit of a cautionary tale when it comes to some of the injuries on this one. So for that purpose, I like him as the super flex. I like him as a QB2. I don't know that I'm really willing to kind of risk it in a late QB type of strategy for him, though. So any other thoughts on Brock Purdy?
No, sir.
All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over to the guy coming off the board at QB 13 right now, and that's Matthew Stafford. Matt Stafford last year, 597 attempts, 388 completions, 4,707 yards, 46 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 1 rushing yard there. So thoughts on Matt Stafford?
So Stafford finished last season at QB3, yet did not have a week where he finished QB1. Like, kind of crazy. Now, here's the thing. Stafford had a career year last year. And well-deserved the MVP. So I'm not trying to take that away from him, but we're definitely going to see some regression here. whether it's the offense, the fact that they change things around. But I do not see a world in which Matthew Stafford throws for 46 touchdowns. I love the fact that he only threw 8 interceptions. Like, I would love to continue to keep that down there because I think Stafford's understanding in his twilight years, right? Like he's not. It's not that he doesn't have any more zip. It's that he's being more responsible with the zip on his football and having playmakers like Puka Nacua and
Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams, yes, excuse me, really helps. They implemented basically that three tight end rotational craziness that the NFL craze is kind of shifting over to, that 13 personnel, and doing some different things out of that. So there's a lot about him that I like. I think that he can finish inside the top 12, even inside the top 10. I just don't think you're going to see top 3. So is there value with Matthew Stafford? Yes. I would tell you that there's also a big risk. His back issues, again, when quarterbacks hit that wall, they do just kind of fall off a cliff. We saw that in a number of players. Aaron Rodgers is living that right now. He's a shell of his former self. And we saw it with Peyton Manning. Tom Brady's kind of the one that held true through the end, but he's just a different breed all the way around. So I think Matthew Stafford is probably in a fair spot, right? Coming off at 13. I think there's a little bit of upside there that can get you inside the top 10 to 12. But I also think that there's some risk where one injury, whether it's his hand, that it seems like every year he throws a pass where his hand snaps down on a helmet and then all of a sudden he goes numb and you're trying to figure out what's going on with him, or his back issues. Like, he's just a big risk if you're waiting that long on quarterback, where, yeah, you're getting him at 13, but he could finish at 23 or he could finish at 7. Like, he's another guy that has a big range just due to the history that we have in hand. The way the offense is set up, you expect success, but what's success look like? I mean, it's a down year if he only throws for 37 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. It's a far cry from where he was last year. So keep that in mind, because he is a quarterback that is not mobile. 1 rushing yard. So you're not getting anything off of the legs. He has to keep the interceptions down. And it's just, if I'm looking for a quarterback later, I want a guy that has legs with a bit more upside personally. I do love Matthew Stafford.
Right. No, it's a very interesting kind of conundrum that you have with Matthew Stafford, right? Like, MVP season, right? Coming off of one of his best years out there, right? Like, that was a career year in touchdown passes. But with Matthew Stafford, the question becomes, do you think that he'll complete more than 371 completions? Like, that is a
big number.
It is a big number. The reason that number specifically, 371, in Matthew Stafford's career, if he completes 371 or more completions over the course of a season, you're going to get a top 10 or a quarterback finish. When he doesn't, you're QB15, QB20, even down there, QB32, right? Like, yeah, some of those had some injury years to them and things like that. But in 2024 with the Rams, 340 completions, finished at QB19. And 2023, 326 completions, was quarterback 15. Right? So even in a Sean McVay offense, if he doesn't get up there around that 371 plus completions over the course of a season, it's going to not equate well for fantasy perspective. And this one here, I don't know that we get to 371. Like, that is a very big number, as you mentioned just a moment ago. He doesn't have the rushing upside to get there. So, right, if you're not expecting Matthew Stafford to touch about 40 touchdowns, touch over 4,000 yards, and get up there, like, that means that he's probably going to be overdrafted at this point. And I think that we're probably seeing maybe a little bit of a touch overvalued here at QB 15 or QB 13 off the board. But this is a guy that, if he fell a couple of spots, I'd gladly pick him up at QB 15, QB 16, because I think that's probably more where we see him finish this year, more so than a top 10 type of finish. And there's some other guys that we just got done talking about that I think I would rather take over Matthew Stafford this year. Any other thoughts on Matthew Stafford?
Only since we were talking about that 371 completions, that means it's 21.8 completions per game in a 17 game season. So you got to get to 22, right? You got to average 22 per game. So is it possible? Yeah, it's possible, because just the amount of attempts that he's going to have, right? Because I think even with how that looks, you can guarantee Matthew Stafford is going to throw the ball 520 times or more. If he plays a full season, he's going to throw the ball 520 times or more. It's just, can you back into it? And yes, it's possible, but Sean McVay always likes to zig when the rest of the NFL is zagging.
Right.
So I'm wondering if what he did last year, if he's going to completely retool the offense and it's going to look a little bit different, and they're going to be more run heavy out of some of these passing looks to try and preserve more of Matthew Stafford, understanding that we now have Myles Garrett. So there's not as much pressure. Like, we just need to get the lead, and then we're going to let our pass rushers just feast. So I would agree with you, Derek. I think that we're probably going to end up just under that. I could see anywhere from 330 to 350 as far as the completions go. But I would tend to tell you that after looking at the numbers, as you brought it up, that 371 is going to be really hard to obtain.
Right. And it's at 330 to 350. I think he's a very, you can just kind of book him in there at QB 15 or 16 at the end of the year. Right. So I at that point, I think, 13, a slight overvalue, but he's a consistent guy. So if you're going in a super flex type of deal, it makes a lot of sense, right, to get something in there and be very consistent with it. But I think there's a few guys going after him that have a bit more upside this year than what we see with Matthew Stafford. Any other thoughts on Matthew Stafford?
Only my last point.
Okay.
As I continue to go down this road. We talked a little bit ago about Bo Nix, right? And if he can get to 30 plus, right, really 33 touchdowns, right, is kind of where we had Bo Nix slated.
Right.
There's a very good likelihood that that's about where Matthew Stafford ends up for passing touchdowns. Like, there is going to be some regression from the 46 that he threw last year. That's what rushing yards mean. Right. As far as that's the difference. That's why we're looking with quarterbacks with legs, because the 350 to 450 rushing yards that we would expect Bo Nix to get is the difference between being QB 14 and QB 7. Like, we're splitting hairs on a lot of these guys, right? There's not a disparaging difference between where we started with Kyler Murray and where we're at right now with Matthew Stafford. We're splitting hairs a little bit, but going back to the Bo Nix piece, if you can add some rushing touchdowns or just the rushing yards, right? 300 and, what was it? Even at 300 yards, it's an extra 30 points.
Right.
Right. You get 1 point per 10 yards. It's an extra 30 points. Well, and that makes a lot of difference when all these guys are so tightly together when you're looking at a fantasy number.
And so, right, to take that, even to kind of piggyback onto that one. So 300 yards, right? It's 30 points. That's 5 additional passing touchdowns that a non-mobile quarterback would have to put up to equate to just the rushing yards from a fantasy perspective, right? That's a big number, right? Like, there's a very big difference between 35 touchdowns and 30 touchdowns over the course of the season. So, and that's where you really have to start kind of questioning some of that and looking at some of that. we've seen this where Matthew Stafford has a tremendous year, and then even in Sean McVay's offense falls off on or has a down year to it. And again, right, some of that just has to do with how the team looks and works and moves. But I would be hard pressed to say that we're going to see another MVP caliber season out of Matthew Stafford this year. So, because I do think that we'll see McVay really lean and do something different, right? Like have the teams having to guess on where they're going to go week in, week out. So, all right, let's go ahead and look at QB number 12 coming off the board, Patrick Mahomes. Last year, Patrick Mahomes, 502 attempts, 315 completions, 22 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 422 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Thoughts on Patrick Mahomes?
This is kind of the first guy where I'm saying no thanks. Like, I think everything that the Chiefs have done this offseason, if we're truly looking at what the Chiefs have done, they are telling us we are going to be better defensively with where we retooled across the defensive line, getting some help across the secondary in the draft, bringing in Kenneth Walker, and then Emmett Johnson. Like, this is the Chiefs telling you that they are not going to throw the ball as much as we've become accustomed to. Whether that has anything to do with the Mahomes injury or not remains to be seen. But Mahomes is a guy, like, I'm not buying that Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for more than 30 touchdowns. I think the actual number, even if he gets back and is able to play 14 games, right? Misses the first 3 games of the season, maybe 4 if they put him on the PUP list. And then he's able to come back. Like, I think you're flirting with 23 to maybe 26 touchdowns on the top end passing, and you can add 2 more in rushing. So it's still sub 30. I don't see how he finishes in the top 12. This just is not his game anymore. So Mahomes is a guy where we've been talking about all these guys that are values. I would tell you Mahomes at this is a reach, in my opinion. Like, if we take the name out of it, as we say so often when we're comparing fantasy players, take the name out of it and let's look at what these numbers are. If you just looked at his numbers over the last 3 seasons, he's mid at best.
Right.
So for me this season, Patrick Mahomes, unless he falls down to, quarterback 16, 17, I'm just going to look at different options. There's other guys who are have a potential higher upside with the offenses that they're in. They're going to be trailing in games more than we expect the Chiefs to, so they're going to have to throw to get back in it. The path to points is difficult for Patrick Mahomes, not even paying attention to the injury, but you add that in on top of it, and he's a guy that I am fading this year.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I think at QB 12 off the board, you're drafting him at his ceiling. This is a guy that I would anticipate probably misses a little bit of time to start the season off here. And a guy, again, right? Like, I don't know that we're going to see him touch 30 touchdowns. We haven't seen him touch 30 touchdowns since 2022, right? It's been 3 full seasons where he's played at least 14 games in those 3 seasons, and hasn't even touched 30 touchdowns. So this is a deal that I would anticipate probably seeing Patrick Mahomes around 3,500 yards, probably about 24, 25 touchdowns through the air. I don't think that we're going to get those kind of bonus Patrick Mahomes, rushing yard points that we've seen him get over the last few seasons, where he somehow manages to get 400 yards on the ground and put up 4 or 5 touchdowns with his legs. Like, I just don't see that happening. I think we'll be lucky if we see maybe about 200 yards worth of rushing and maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns on the ground. So I think that takes a tremendous hit. And this is a guy that as much as the name side of it, like, you have a hard time going, oh yeah, he's going to be a QB 15, 16 type of deal. I think realistically that's probably about where we see him finish, if not even a little bit lower down that list. So, yeah, it is kind of one of those that he inevitably will be probably overdrafted in a lot of leagues because name power does stick on some of that, and we'll see how that plays out there. But this is a guy that I'm pretty well avoiding in most drafts unless he happens to fall to me down there QB 16, 17. Okay, I'll take a shot on that, and if he does kind of perform up there, maybe I can flip him for a different piece down the road. Any other thoughts on Patrick Mahomes?
Next.
All righty, let's go ahead and look at Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart last year, 339 attempts, 216 completions, 2,272 yards, 15 touchdowns, 487 yards on the ground with 9 rushing touchdowns. Thoughts on Jackson Dart?
Jackson, this one's kind of hard for me, right? Like I don't want to buy into all the hype, but I think having John Harbaugh as your coach is going to help him. I think having the regiment and the discipline of a really good NFL head coach is going to help Jackson Dart. Malik Neighbors comes back, which I think helps drastically. I think that kind of gets forgotten in these Jackson Dart numbers, as he really did all this without Malik. And then once his buddy Cam Scattaboo went down, he was scrambling a little bit, right? And he was throwing to guys that we hardly know their names. Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, who else was even on that team, Derek? Like he had 2 or 3 different tight ends. Like it was a hodgepodge. And so
Right.
the idea is, can he improve? Well, yes, he can absolutely improve, but he's got to learn how to slide also. Otherwise, we're going to see his shelf life get deteriorated very quickly, because he's not the world's biggest quarterback like a Cam Newton or Josh Allen. He's a little bit smaller framed than those guys are. So taking some of the big hits that he took in his rookie season, we gotta get him out of bounds, right? Get out of bounds. You got to go down. Like, you don't need to be dropping your shoulder trying to run over linebackers. So that being said, he has tremendous upside, right? He has a very high ceiling because of his rushing potential, because we expect the Giants to be trailing in games, right? So he's going to be throwing the ball a little bit more. He gets his number 1 receiver back. And even if Malik Neighbors has a slow start, you would expect him by the midway point to kind of catch fire a little bit, and those two to be on a really good rapport. So I think having him kind of right here at that fringe QB1 level, I think is pretty accurate. I think you have a little bit of a ceiling there, maybe up to 7, I think is maybe the ceiling. I think the floor, as long as he stays healthy, is probably closer to like 15, 16. So it's kind of right there in the middle. He's a fun player to watch, and sometimes that's what you want on your fantasy team. Like, you want these guys to be good, but you also want to enjoy watching them play. And Jackson Dart does give you that, right? He's a rah guy. He's got a little swagger to him. It's just, how fast can the New York Giants turn the corner on offense, as opposed to being okay, they have 1 or 2 good guys, to being a respectable offense in a fairly competitive division, no matter how good or bad one team is versus the other in total rankings, right? The NFC East does a good job of beating each other up for the most part.
Right. Jackson Dart is a guy that I'm having a hard time kind of getting behind this ADP, where he's coming off the board, right? Like, I get it. There's some upside here. But this is a guy that I'm almost very willing just to be wrong on this one. A couple of reasons, right? One, the news kind of surrounding Malik Neighbors is that he's kind of been slow on the recovery side of things, right? So, if Neighbors isn't out there, that's a huge weapon not out there for the Giants. The other thing too, right? Like you mentioned, a Harbaugh might be helpful in the Jackson Dart move. The thing that I think is a hindrance is the offensive coordinator. Matt Nagy is the offensive coordinator on this one. Outside of being the guy that manages to carry the clipboard when Patrick Mahomes was the quarterback, like hasn't overly had much success on that one. So I'm not necessarily like lighting the world on fire on that one. This is another guy too that's right. Like we haven't seen him really get it done with his arm, right? Like this is a guy that last year, yeah, managed to throw 15 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. It'll be interesting to see how defenses prepare for him a little bit more so. Because there's a lot of these deals where they're not looking for him to use his arm much in these games. The amount of times that he hit 30 attempts in a game was really pretty low last year. Really, we didn't even see him touch 300 yards through the air once in his rookie season. So this is a deal that it'll be interesting to see how many of these teams just simply put a spy on him and say, okay, try and beat us with your arm, and kind of cut out the rushing angles and rushing work on that one. So this is a guy that I said it to begin with. I'm willing to be wrong, and on that point from where he's coming off the board, I almost on a you're not willing to draft him at this point. So yeah, he could very well prove me wrong and finish up there, QB5. But I think that at the same time, he could just as easily finish down there at QB 20, 22. And with that kind of range, I'm willing to be wrong on the potential upside and also miss out on that downside there as well. Any other thoughts on Jackson Dart? All right. Let's go ahead and head up to Trevor Lawrence coming off the board at QB 10. Trevor Lawrence last year, 560 attempts, 341 completions, 4,007 yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 359 yards on the ground, and 9 rushing touchdowns. Thoughts on Trevor Lawrence? That's one.
I so desperately want to make Trevor Lawrence one of my guys for this season. Like I've been off this bandwagon. So let me start by clarifying. I have not been on the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon through the early parts of his career. I have not. Like I've seen glimpses, but we've all seen the struggles of Trevor Lawrence. I am dangerously close from liking it. And mainly it's because I like so many of the weapons around him. I like the offensive philosophy. I like the fact that everything really kind of started to click for him last year. My challenge with Trevor Lawrence is, yes, he finished as QB4 last year, but it was inconsistent as hell as how we got there. Like he had, the rushing touchdowns are nice. Can we count on those? Maybe. He's a bit of a bigger quarterback. I think people don't realize how big Trevor Lawrence actually is. And his body's able to take that. He's only 26 years old. So while it feels like he's been in the league for 7-8 years now, that's not the case. And he's actually going to be able to bring back the same offense that he left last season with. And I think that's a big key to it. You have Parker Washington, you have Brian Thomas Jr., you have I'm forgetting the third guy.
I've got Travis Hunter, and they just drafted a
Hunter's playing defense. I'm not even messing around with that. Hold on. I need to be smart about this. Jacoby Myers. There we go. Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington, Brian Thomas Jr. Yes, Travis Hunter's there. They drafted Josh Cameron. But I like Lawrence. Like I'm happy with drafting him here. Like I don't feel like I'm waiting terribly long. But if I'm getting Lawrence in this spot, I think I'm okay with it for the most part. Again, he's just the guy I'm willing to gamble on this year, right? Like, yes, there's probably better value down the board, as we talked about. Maybe it's a Bo Nix, maybe it's a Brock Purdy. We talked about some guys that we, maybe don't like as much, but Trevor Lawrence is a guy that I think I would personally rather have than Caleb Williams, then Justin Herbert, guys who we still haven't spoken about yet. I think that the way that Joe Burrow can't stay healthy, I'm happy to pass on Joe Burrow and then grab Trevor Lawrence a couple rounds later, because at least Lawrence stays healthy. It's not always pretty, and Burrow can put up a lot of numbers really fast. Again, we'll talk about him in a minute, but Lawrence stays on the field. So he's a guy that I really like, and I am telling everybody right now, I'm just going to have to think long and hard whether I'm willing to smash draft or whether I'm going to, swallow my pride and gut instinct a little bit and go further down the board and get a different quarterback, because I do really like the potential of this Jaguars offense this year. I am just trying to figure out whether I'm going to hit that button or not.
Oh, fair point. I am willing to hit the draft button with Trevor Lawrence coming off the board at QB10, right? Like this is a guy that having Liam Cohen as the coach for a second consecutive year, and this is something that we haven't really seen Trevor Lawrence have much of in his pro career, is a lot of consistency on that, and especially around the coaching staff and the and that support staff there. So I do think that that another year under Liam Cohen is going to be a big deal for him. This is a deal that he started off really slow, and then the light bulb kind of clicked, and we saw that go on. I do think we see Brian Thomas Jr. return to form, right? There were some reports last year he was dealing with a bit of a wrist issue that I think kind of severely hampered that one. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. Jacoby Myers certainly showed up and showed out in that offense as well. And this is one that I think we will see maybe a touch bit of regression, but I think that QB 10 is probably a pretty safe floor. Wouldn't surprise me to see at the end of the season that we see Trevor Lawrence in that 38 to 3,900 yards, 28 touchdowns, and he picks up another 300 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. So I think from those avenues in that aspect, we're going to see him be able to be a pretty solid QB for you, and really don't have a problem smashing draft and moving on at QB 10. Any other thoughts on Trevor Lawrence?
No, I'm thinking about those long flowing locks.
There you go. All righty, let's go ahead and hit up number 9 on the list, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert last year, 512 attempts, 340 completions, 3,727 yards, 26 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 498 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Thoughts on Justin Herbert?
This is a guy that I really want to like, but I feel like there's always some reason why he's not as good as he should be. And I don't know how to explain that other than just saying it that way. Like, looking at his game log, right, last year, it was such an up and down set. 5, 18, 12, 20, 20, 14, 2, 3, 4. All right, we're hitting our stride. Whoops, 17, 31, 19, 17, 27, 24, 15. Like, I don't want that. I guess that's where I'm ultimately at. Yes, his end result gets you there, but I don't want that roller coaster on a week-to-week basis. I would like to have a bit more consistency and a bit of a better baseline with my quarterback, and then be able to capture some of the high weeks. Now, I like him. He's a good quarterback. He's got a ton of arm talent. Maybe it's a bit different this year, right? You're not trying to force feed Keenan Allen anymore. You can kind of see what you have with Ladd McConkey again. You're going back to Quentin Johnston and seeing what you have there. Marion Hampton should be able to take another step forward, another kind of hindrance, because we know that Jim would rather run the ball than throw the ball in a lot of regards. So I think for me, Justin Herbert's being overdrafted in this position. I think if he fell another couple spots, I might wait for him. I think I like him. I like him more than Mahomes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think, we can agree on that. I like him more than Mahomes. Do I like him more than Jackson Dart? 50-50, right? I think I like the arm talent better than Jackson Dart, but I don't know that I trust the fantasy results as much as Jackson Dart. Brock
Like,
Purdy, I think I'd take Brock Purdy over Justin Herbert. Like, I don't know. Trevor Lawrence, absolutely. Caleb Williams, maybe. I think I'd probably take Caleb over that just with the offensive weaponry that they have and just trusting Ben Johnson and that offense. So again, I struggle with Justin. I like the guy. I like the way he plays the NFL position of quarterback. I just don't love the inconsistency of fantasy output. And for me, I think I'm going to be fading him at his current ADP because of that inconsistency.
yeah, I can see that. The Justin Herbert at QB9, like that feels like the ceiling for him, right? Like one of those that I think when it's all said and done, right? Like he performs well, he does all of the things. He might sneak up to QB8, but I think realistically, his his output is going to get you anywhere from about QB9 to QB13 kind of range on that one. So one of those that when you're drafting him at the ceiling and really what you're hoping you can get out of this, right? Like last year, it was a career year for him in rushing yards. I don't know that we're going to see him be able to get back to almost 500 yards on the ground. Like, maybe closer to about 400 yards. I think we see a regression in rushing touchdowns as well. Wouldn't surprise me, though, to see him get up to around 3,900 yards and 27, 28 touchdowns through the air. But right, you were talking about Jackson Dart or Justin Herbert. For me, it's not close. It's Justin Herbert by a long shot on that one. And right, like comes very heavily into the fact that Mike McDaniels is a offensive minded guy that I think can utilize pieces and do some really good things. And that is certainly a difference maker for me between those two quarterbacks. But even with Mike McDaniel there, I think that QB9 might still be kind of the ceiling for a Justin Herbert this year. Any other thoughts on Justin Herbert?
No, sir.
All righty. Let's go ahead and take a look at QB number 8 off the board, and that is Dak Prescott. Last year, Dak Prescott, 600 attempts, 404 completions, 4,552 yards, 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 177 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Thoughts on Dak Prescott?
Everything screams that you should draft Dak Prescott. The Cowboys did not get that much better defensively. You know that when he's throwing the ball, it's being fed into 2 really talented wide receivers with George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. Their running game was okay with Javonte Williams and company, but necessarily didn't light the world on fire. And the pieces are there, with the exception of if you look at year by year contrast of Dak Prescott on even numbered years, for whatever reason, he becomes snake bit. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's been injury. Again, not that we're promoting injury, not that we want injury, but the numbers in hand. He just struggles to replicate back-to-back really good years. Right. So he is a gamble just because of that. Now, if we're taking it at face value and just looking at the numbers and understanding what this offense is, Dak Prescott should be a smash in this spot. Should be an absolute smash in this spot. So I might have a hard time turning away from that. Like, you want to talk about interesting pairings, right? A Dak Prescott, and then you go down and you get, a Bo Nix or Jared Goff, or maybe Jared Goff, even a bit more stability, right? Maybe not the Bo Nix piece, but maybe a Jared Goff. You get a bit more stability there. I know last year, kind of the sexy pairing was if you waited really late and then you double tapped Dak and Brock. I did that in a couple best ball leagues, thinking I was doing really well until Brock got hurt, and then kind of changed things. So I don't. Without predicting injury, I don't see there's a reason why you couldn't or shouldn't push draft if Dak Prescott's falling to you at this spot. We'll see how the boards kind of lay out as we start doing some more mocks closer into it. But right now, I would tell you that this is adequate for Dak. I would tell you that there's some ceiling built into this. He could absolutely finish inside the top 5 with as much as the Cowboys are going to throw the ball. We see this consistently on Dak's, good years. When he's throwing the ball and throwing it well, there are very few quarterbacks keeping pace with him. For all the people who just, a lot of it, and it's Cowboy fans who just hate Dak Prescott for whatever reason, you're not going to find anything better off the street. So you might as well embrace it. But I think with this offense, going back with Schottenheimer again, having CeeDee Lamb back and healthy, having George Pickens on another 1-year prove-it deal, so he's going to have something there. The Cowboys are really tough to defend offensively with 2 all-pro wide receivers on the field at the same time. And when you have that, it means success for the quarterback statistically, and that's ultimately all we're after for fantasy football. So that's a long-winded answer to just say, I think I'm drafting him here, and I'm just going to cross my fingers that he breaks the curse.
Fair enough. Yeah, that is very much the Jekyll and Hyde side of things. Is even years does a number on your fantasy roster for the wrong reasons, and on the odd years does a number on your fantasy rosters for the right reasons on this one, right? So it is an interesting deal, but the question that I look at this, and this is where I'm kind of approaching this one from, is the number 590. Dak Prescott, I think realistically has to touch that 590 passing attempts this season in order to have a good year, right? And we've seen this play out over the last 7 seasons. Anytime Dak Prescott touches 590 or more pass attempts in a season, does phenomenal, right? Has a great year where you're typically not finishing below quarterback 7 in any one of those years. You're typically talking 4,500 yards at a minimum, 30 touchdowns at a minimum, right? Like all of those things start kind of getting baked in there. But the problem is that if you don't think that he's going to get to 590 attempts, then that starts becoming an issue where we're probably going to start seeing this more at a QB 12, QB 14 type of range. I think I'm willing to take the shot and think that we're going to get up to that 590 attempts. And if he does, I think you're going to see again another kind of rinse and repeat, 4,400 yards and 32 touchdowns. And at that point, I feel like there's some good value. But if you're of the opinion that we're not going to see Dak Prescott hit that 590 pass attempts, then I would stay away from him. Any other thoughts on this one?
No, I think that 590 is a good number, and I think that kind of sold me. Like, yeah, I think I'm just drafting the guy. Okay. I'm just going to go for it in a lot of cases. Not every league, but there's going to be a number of leagues where buckle up. Here we go.
All righty. Glad I could sell you on that one. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the QB7 off the board, and that's Jalen Hurts. Last year, Jalen Hurts, 454 attempts, 294 completions, 3,224 yards, 25 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 421 yards on the ground, and 8 rushing touchdowns. Thoughts on Jalen Hurts?
The Jalen Hurts has a lot of sneaky points built into his fantasy output because of the tush push. And his ability to essentially be the goal line back. And it's not necessarily Saquon Barkley a lot of times. So there is built-in advantages to that. Now, all that said, he only had 8 rushing touchdowns last year. And I say only just because it was double digits, 14, 15, 13, 10, the prior 4 seasons to that. So 8 was a pretty big regression. I think that getting A.J. Brown out of town is going to help out Jalen Hurts. Only because A.J. Brown can be loud, bombastic, and maybe not necessarily in a bad way, but he's definitely drawing attention, like feed me the ball and what the heck, type thing. So I think there's some room here for Jalen Hurts. I think he can push back up the board and finish in the top 5 again. Um, but he's got to be able to increase his ability to just make the easy pass. And that's ultimately what it is. Jalen Hurts sometimes really struggles with the easy pass. I think the Eagles focusing more on Devonta Smith and Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert is probably a bit better. Let him dink and dunk his way down the field. That's okay. The Eagles have a way of just turning diamonds out of coal. And I think last year was a pretty coal heavy season. There's a lot of people really down on the Eagles, how they were playing offensively at times. And if I'm not mistaken, he's did he get it? He got a new play caller again, didn't he?
Yep, Sean Mannion.
So former quarterback. So I think that helps Jalen Hurts a little bit. But yeah, he's an interesting character. I have him in our home league, in our keeper league, and I'm really struggling on what to do with Jalen Hurts right now. So I'm trying to speak good juju because he's on our home league roster, and that's the league of record for anybody who cares. I don't care about the rest of the leagues half as much as I care about this one. So I want good things to happen, but I would tell you that given a choice, I'm probably not drafting Jalen Hurts. I'm probably looking other places. I think I like the upside of a Trevor Lawrence waiting a little bit longer. If I want a quarterback early, I'm probably going to go higher up the list than Jalen Hurts. But if we're comparing, I'd still take him over Mahomes. I think him versus Justin Herbert is an interesting comparison when you get to total end of season. But we'll kind of see where that cookie crumbles, if you will. So I'm very mixed bag on Jalen Hurts. I understand where he's being drafted. I think it's fair. Could be top 5, could fall out of the top 10 this year, though.
Fair enough. I really don't have a problem taking Jalen Hurts where he's coming off the board at this point, right? Like one of those that I think, and we saw this play out several times throughout the season last year, where the Eagles just looked a little discombobulated. It looked like they weren't all necessarily kind of going in the same direction. At times when watching some of those telecasts. So I think that's new play caller, some changes being made around the locker room, maybe helps unify this roster and helps kind of galvanize this team a little bit. I do think we see Jalen Hurts have a bit of a bounce back this year, right? Devonta Smith, very good receiver, right? Heisman winner back in the day. They also went out and drafted Mekhi Lemon with a high draft pick here. Dallas Goedert's there. They went out and got Eli Stowers as well. Saquon Barkley still in the mix. So this is a deal that it wouldn't surprise me to see Jalen Hurts get a bounce back here, and we see over 500 rushing yards. We see that double-digit touchdown reached again, and we see him potentially even take a step forward here as well with some of the passing work as well. So I think that this is not necessarily value or not necessarily over like a reach. I think this is pretty fair value for where you're coming and what you kind of are drafting is what you're gonna get with the Jalen Hurts coming off the board here. So I kind of like where he's coming off the board. I don't have a problem rocking and rolling where he's going. Any other thoughts on Jalen Hurts?
No, I'm still conflicted.
Okay. All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to the guy coming off the board at QB6 right now, and that is Caleb Williams. Last year, Caleb Williams, 568 attempts, 330 yards, 3,942 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 388 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Thoughts on Caleb Williams?
I I might have to say that I was wrong about Caleb Williams after this season, because coming out, I was not a fan for a number of different reasons. I thought the hype was overblown. I think now that he's attached to Ben Johnson and they've put a slew of weapons around him and they continue to improve the offensive line and they're bringing in bits and pieces for that defense. Like, there's a lot about Caleb Williams I like. And I think that I think I'm willing to take him here at 6 and just realize that there may not be room for much of a ceiling, but I think he has a really safe floor. Like, I think he's almost guaranteed 6 to 9, and there's a possibility of being 5 or 4. It just it's kind of how I'm looking at it with all these weapons. Another year in this offense. I expect him to have over 4,000 passing yards. I expect him to have over 30 touchdowns this year. He still has some rushing ability, which is great. 3 touchdowns, while it doesn't seem like enough, it adds up really well, right? Almost 400 rushing yards. Like, I can just see improvement all the way around in year 2. So it's going to be really, I think it's going to be really hard for me to not draft Caleb Williams. Comparing him to Dak, I'm going to take Williams. Like, I think Dak has a higher true upside because of how that team is set up, but I like the youth. I like the fact that we don't have injury issues with Caleb Williams. I like the offensive coordinator more for Chicago than I like it in Dallas, like all the things. So for all the praise and the positive outlook for Caleb or for Dak, I do like Caleb Williams a bit more. So he's a guy that if I'm willing to take early-ish quarterback, right? Maybe I don't want the top couple, but I want that next tier. I think Caleb Williams absolutely fits in that next tier, and he's a guy I could be happy with.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that he provides some good upside here. And this is one that again, a guy I feel like you draft and you're going to kind of, at worst case, you're going to get some fair value back on this one with a kind of that mid QB1 finish. But this is a guy that if we see him take that kind of next step and take some additional growth here, this is a guy that very well could make that push up into that next tier when it comes to quarterbacks, right? And things are kind of in place, right? Another year with Ben Johnson. We've seen Roma Dunze, kind of coming into that third year as a wide receiver. Luther Burden on the roster. They went out and have a Colston Loveland on the roster. So there's a lot of weapons around this one. And yeah, if you can see some efficiencies kind of tick up here, right? Because Caleb Williams didn't have a great completion percentage last year, about 58%. If you can see that tick up into that 63, 64, this is a guy that we could very well see competing into that 4,500-ish yards, 30 to 35 touchdown type of range. And you can see him really kind of, he gets enough done with his legs that you can see him make a push and potentially even get up as high as, a QB3, QB2 type of range. I don't know that we see him necessarily challenge old Josh Allen here for that QB1 type of deal, but he certainly could make a push to make it up into that elite tier this year. Any other thoughts on Caleb Williams?
No.
All right.
No, not yet. All positive so far.
All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to QB5 coming off the board. That's Drake May. Last year, 492 complete attempts, 354 completions, 4,394 yards, 31 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 450 yards on the ground, and 4 touchdowns. Thoughts on Drake May?
I think Drake May has all the upside in the world. What I am interested in seeing out of this young quarterback is how he is going to keep the team focused leading into the season because of all the off-season noise with his head coach. Now you have AJ Brown coming in, and what does that relationship look like? I like the fact that he protected the football, though. And regardless of what's going on, I think if he can continue to protect the football, it spells really good things for him. He is more mobile than people give him credit for, right? 4 rushing touchdowns is not bad at all. We like to see that. So I think that's a sneaky upside that we got in there. 450 yards even. So again, that's bonus fantasy points, which helps. So I think if he can stay in that neighborhood of around 35 touchdowns, I think that Drake May is adequately going at 5 with a ceiling. You have to say of at least 2 because that's where he ended last year. And his floor at this point, I would tell you, is still inside the top 8. So very, very high floor. Obviously a high ceiling if you're talking about can finish 2. If you're getting him at 5, I think it's adequate for what it is. Their schedule's a bit tougher this year. So we're going to see how that pans out, playing a Super Bowl runner-up type schedule and all these division leaders. But I do think that Drake May and the Patriots are going to be able to answer the call here. So I like him at 5. And I expect good things out of the kid, mainly because I've been tooting his horn since draft day.
Right. Drake May is a guy that I'm a little conflicted on this year, right? And a lot of that has to do with some of the things you just mentioned, right? A lot of offseason noise coming in here, right? Like, so how does this team, how does this locker room, how does the organization deal with that, and what does that look like moving forward this offseason and really getting into the season? One organization that I think can probably move forward with that better than most would be New England, just because we've seen this organization be able to manage that in years past. Again, right, different locker room, different cast of characters than what we've seen in some of those years past. But this is one that I do think we're going to see some regression out of Drake May, simply from the standpoint he was so efficient last year. About 72% completion percentage. That is a really difficult number to try and keep up with. And I don't know that's a number that's really that repeatable. So I do think that we see some regression there. I think you see some regressions in both touchdowns and yardage, right? Like they are, as you mentioned, they are going to have a tougher schedule here. So this is one that I think we may see Drake May pushing closer to maybe 38 to 4,000 yards through the air instead of that almost 4,400. So I think we're going to see some regression there. I think we probably, instead of that 31 touchdowns through the air, I think we're probably closer to about 26, maybe 27. So I think there's some regression there. I think the rushing output is pretty repeatable in that 400 to 500 yard range and probably about 4 touchdowns. But I do think we see just enough of regression through some of these pieces here that we're probably talking Drake May closer to like QB-7-8 when it's all said and done. So maybe a touch bit of a reach on this one. But at the same time, right, if you're talking about taking Drake May at 5 versus Caleb Williams or Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott, right? Those are all same guys that are going right now kind of in that same round of draft capital in that kind of 6th round range. So, at that point, right, if Drake May's your guy out of that tier of quarterback, I don't have a problem with you drafting him. I do think that there's maybe some guys that'll outperform him this year, potentially in that same kind of draft capital, but I think that you're going to see a good season from him nonetheless. Any other thoughts here on Drake May?
I'm going to add this in, knowing that the Patriots' schedule was very easy last year. But
right,
through the 17 games that Drake May played, he only played 1 game where he finished outside of QB2, and it was at QB-25, so just missed QB2 range.
Mm-hmm.
And in total only had 5 games where he was outside QB1. So again, the consistency may be part of the schedule, right? So I understand what you're saying, but I do appreciate that even in his more challenging games, he still performed really well outside of his game at Buffalo, right? His game in week 5 last year at Buffalo was his worst game of the season. And other than that, he was QB2 against Cleveland, which, say what you will, Cleveland's defense was still crazy, right? You still have Myles Garrett chasing you around the field, really good defensive backs. He followed up late season with a QB13 home against Buffalo, at Baltimore, who was still fighting for something in week 16 because the AFC North had not been fully decided yet. QB7 that week. And then in championship week, finished QB2 at the Jets. Now, yes, maybe the Jets were laying over, but it's still a rivalry at that point. And I'm not, I would have to go back and remind myself if the Jets really laid down for that one or if he just showed out. So yes, there's potential for regression, but I do think that overall I like the consistency that he provided. And I don't know that we're going to see a massive change in the fact of I think it's going to be closer to his numbers from last year than the Justin Herbert peaks and valleys that I referenced earlier.
Fair enough. All righty, let's go ahead and move on over to QB number 4 off the board, and that's Jaden Daniels. Last year, Jaden Daniels in an injury-shortened season, 188 attempts, 114 completions, 1,262 yards, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 278 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Thoughts on Jaden Daniels?
Pass. Like the kid has all the talent in the world. I don't know that I trust what the Commanders are doing on offense. He is a little bit smaller framed. We saw some weird injuries last year. I'm not saying that they repeat themselves, but are we really convinced that, him throwing the ball to just basically Terry McLaurin is going to solve the day here? They didn't really do anything to support the run game and give him any extra help there. There's just a lot of questions around this Commanders team right now. And, Antonio Williams, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane, Treylon Burks, like these are not wide receivers who you would think of as, 2, 3, and 4 guys that are NFL caliber at this point. So, all those things added up. I'm not willing to spend this high of draft capital on Jaden Daniels. I would much rather have a Drake May. I would rather take a Caleb Williams. I would rather go further down the board, get a Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence type, as opposed to taking such a gamble on Jaden Daniels. So I'm willing to be wrong here. This is just how I see it, but the bust potential is too high for the, quarterback that you would be drafting with such high capital.
Right. And this is definitely a risk reward type of play if you're drafting him where he's coming off the board, right? This is a guy that you're ultimately paying for the upside, but you have to be willing to accept the bust risk there as well. Simply from the standpoint that, right, the Commanders really haven't, outside of Terry McLaurin, really don't have another receiver to really kind of throw the ball to on this one. So this is a deal that you're ultimately betting on Jaden McDaniels' legs going to carry him through, and you're hoping that he can get you somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 to 800 yards on the ground and 5 to 8 touchdowns on the ground as well, right? Like that's where you'll see him ultimately return value in this kind of spot here. You may still see him get up there, maybe about 34 to 3,600 yards and maybe about 20 to 25 touchdowns with his arm. But if you're drafting him with this capital, you're banking on the fact that you're going to see a 700 to 800 yards on the ground and 5+ touchdowns, which, right, like it was a couple of kind of interesting injuries that we typically don't see much last year that kind of sidelined him. But again, this is a deal that a guy running the football and running a lot has the potential risk on that one. And so this is definitely one that you're paying for upside and hoping that the risk factor doesn't come into play. So this is a little bit of a buyer beware and risk reward type of draft pick in my book. Any other thoughts on Jaden Daniels?
No, sir.
All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over to Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow last year, 259 attempts, 171 completions, 1,809 yards, 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 41 rushing yards. Thoughts on Joe Burrow?
Here's another guy that I think I'm gonna pass on. All the potential in the world, but just cannot stay healthy. And it is just he misses games. So in 24 he was able to get all of them in. Great, right? 43 touchdowns. So that's awesome. We can see that ceiling there. But then he has a season with only 8 games played. There's a season with 10 games, another season with 10 games. Like, it's a very mixed bag. If he's healthy, he's anywhere between 3 and 8. I think his sophomore season ended up at quarterback 8. But in games or seasons where he's missing a bunch of time, 25, 25, 29. So again, it is a high risk, high reward type play. I mentioned earlier, I would like a bit more consistency out of my quarterback. And because of that, more cases than not, I'm going to pass on Joe Burrow where I have to draft him. And I will take a step down and I will get Caleb Williams on the way back.
Yeah, I could see that one. Although, right, we were talking earlier about Dak and it being an even year, potentially being out on that one. Joe Burrow has kind of the opposite, where the odd years are the years he tends to, he seems to miss a lot of time, and the even years we've seen him ball out there, right? So last 2 odd years, down years, last 2 even years, up years. So if that trend holds true, we could very well see a top 5 QB finish on this one. And if Joe Burrow plays all the games, you're talking about a guy that's going to be pushing to even clear 5,000 yards on the through the air and 40 plus touchdowns. Like, that's very, very much in the realm of possibilities on outcomes on this one. But this is a guy that where he's coming off the board, I'm not overly excited to press draft there. Like, this is one that I'd probably rather pick up a third running back or a third wide receiver with how I'm tending to put together teams, and potentially miss out on a guy that's going to put up 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns on this one. Just from the standpoint that one, I like my roster, how I can construct those a little bit better with some depth at some of the other positions. And there's plenty of guys behind this one that I feel like I'm not losing out on a ton if I maybe miss out here on Joe Burrow where he's coming off the board. So heck of a player, and we'll put up some, if plays all 17 games, we'll put up some tremendous stats for your fantasy roster. Just, I think I'm going to be out on him with how I like to construct rosters. Any other thoughts on Joe Burrow?
No, sir.
All right, let's run over and talk about Lamar Jackson, who's coming off the board at QB number 2. Last year, Lamar Jackson, 302 attempts, 192 completions, 2,549 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 349 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Thoughts on Lamar Jackson?
He's another guy that, because of all the changes in Baltimore, I'm probably fading away from Lamar Jackson. It's a little too inconsistent. There's more questions than answers on what this Baltimore offense is going to look like. Both him and Derrick Henry are another year older. Their wide receiver room is still very interesting. Behind Zay Flowers, like, is Rashad Bateman actually going to take the next step, or is he a candidate? They brought in Elijah Surratt out of IU, so that could be a help. But Mark Andrews, another year older. Like, they're just getting old in all the wrong positions. On top of the change of coach and offensive coordinator and what I would perceive as overall philosophy, I think I'm willing to pass and just be wrong. But I also think that I'm not going to be. Like, the likelihood of him having 33 total touchdowns is much higher than him having 37 plus. So great player, very dynamic, but I don't think he's going to continue to run the way he has been. We've started to see that decline here a little bit, and I'm not convinced that his pass catchers are good enough to make up for the lack of running from Lamar Jackson. So I'm going to pass on him at QB2.
Yeah, it's pretty much a hard pass for me at this point, right? Like, this is one of those that I don't know that we're going to see Lamar Jackson put up the work with his legs to carry him up there at this point, right? The pass catchers, as you mentioned, I'm not a big believer in many of the pass catchers in Baltimore this year. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see Lamar Jackson maybe touch about 33 to 3,400 yards through the air, 27 touchdowns. I think we see him maybe get to about between that 500 and 600 yards on the ground and about 4 rushing touchdowns. But all that being said, like that's a recipe that's going to be hard to ultimately get into QB2 range or QB1 range to return the value on that. So there's a lot of other guys that I'm willing to take further down there that I don't feel like I'm going to miss out as much on that one. And where he's coming off the board right now in the 4th round, I think I would far rather look at running back or wide receiver to round out my roster than take the QB, because if I'm going to take a QB in that range, they've got to be a positional difference maker for my roster and outperform the next closest guy by a good clip to be able to make my roster work with and be competitive on the with the value I lost at some other positions there. Any other thoughts on Lamar Jackson?
No, sir.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the guy coming off the board, QB1, Josh Allen. Josh Allen last year, 460 attempts, 319 completions, 3,668 yards, 25 touchdowns, 579 yards on the ground, and 14 rushing touchdowns with 10 interceptions. Thoughts on Josh Allen?
If you want an early round quarterback, to me, it is Josh Allen or bust. So I just here's the last 6 seasons. Finish QB1, finish QB2, finish QB1, finish QB2, finish QB1, finish QB1. And then you go back to a sophomore season and, it was just a QB6 finish.
Right.
Like, the model of consistency for fantasy quarterback right now. So if you're going early, to me, it's Josh Allen or bust. His floor is, he basically doesn't have a floor. Like he just gets to where you drafted him at. So, and even through these years, like his rushing numbers are pretty consistent all the way through. Had 14 rushing touchdowns last year, which was second most in his career. And he's just been the model of consistency and a guy that if I'm going early quarterback, I'm smashing yes and moving on, no questions asked. I don't care what receiving core looks like around him at the moment. I know that the running game's a bit better, and they've been able to rely on that a little bit more in Buffalo, but when it comes down to it, this guy just finds a way to put up numbers consistently and always has your fantasy team in a position to win week in and week out.
Right. And with some of the other guys that had been keeping pace and really challenging him, right, from a Lamar Jackson, from a Jalen Hurts standpoint, like we've seen some of those things kind of fall off there, right, to be able to challenge Josh Allen for that kind of QB1 range on this one. So this year, I don't know that there's I think this is QB1 when it's all said and done. With where he's coming off the board with the 2nd round pick, I don't know that I'm necessarily a big fan of that draft capital here. You really do have to believe that he's going to outpace the next quarterback by a good, probably average of 5 points a game, to be able to kind of build a roster around that to make that work out for you. But this is a guy that, you're right, if you have him on your roster, it's a set it and forget it quarterback, and you rock and roll through there. Because Josh Allen's going to be very consistent and get you that 35 to 3,700 yards, probably closer about like 25 to 29 touchdowns through the air. But he's usually pretty consistent around that 500 to 600 yards on the ground. The one thing that does worry me is just that touchdown number on the ground. Like that's an incredibly hard number to maintain. He's managed to do it for 3 consecutive seasons. And if he can put up the double-digit touchdowns through the rushing work again, like that'll be something that propels him into another QB1 finish. But this is a guy that if you want to take the QB early route and try and get a positional difference maker, this is your guy. You draft, smash draft and move on. But most of the rosters that I'm going to put together, Josh Allen's not going to be a guy that I'll be targeting in the second round just because of how I like to put together roster construction. Any other thoughts on Josh Allen?
No, he is the cream of the crop. And clearly, but at least between the two of us, there's no dispute.
Right. So, all righty. Well, very good. I think that's going to take us down here to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Yeah, as always, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, comments around this quarterback grouping or the quarterback grouping that we did last week. So again, we went through 34 through 18 last week, 17 through 1 this week. But yeah, if you have any questions about who you should be looking at, who you should maybe be staying away from, feel free to hit us up at Good Old Boys FF, wherever you consume your social media content. And as always, please head over to YouTube, give us a like and subscribe so that way you can get the notifications when Derek and I go live next.
Awesome. Yep. So like Kevin said, make sure you check all that out. Hit that subscribe button. Appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in, but that's going to do it for us tonight. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.